So I'm now going to take the next few minutes to just reflect on the past, talk a bit about the present and the future with you, along with the comments I'm about to make or the presentation. I also invite you to type your questions as you have already in the Q&A box and participate in the polls that we're going to be asking you some questions over the next little while. So you'll see them show up on the screen. Let me begin by saying or repeating what you have already heard. Thank you, Andrew, for being the slide manager for me. Let me just start by saying that 2021, as you've heard, is the Canadian Women's Foundation's 30th anniversary. So 30 years since we've been around, and you may wonder how this happened. So in 1986, two grade school friends, Nancy Ruth and Susan Woods, you can see their pictures here, were discussing what they could do to build philanthropy or gender equality efforts in Canada. And they were two of 8 visionary founding mothers who launched the Canadian Women's Foundation in 1991 to galvanize feminist philanthropy and advance gender equality. That first year, the foundation awarded $50,000 in grants to organizations. And thank you to our founding mothers, our 8 founding mothers that you see here. Let me just take a moment to name them: Nancy Ruth, Susan Woods, Rosemary Brown, Mary Eberts, Dawn Elliott, Julie White, Kay Segar Johnson, and Elizabeth Stewart. I would like to acknowledge that 2 of our founding mothers may actually be on this call, Nancy Ruth and Julie White. If they are, please be acknowledged and know how much we love you, and thank you so much that you created this foundation with us that we're now leading. I'd also like to acknowledge that Beverly Wybrow, who is the long-standing former president of the Canadian Women's Foundation, is also with us. She was critical to the foundation's remarkable growth. And I am actually very honored to be carrying on the torch that she lit, which I took on in 2016. Since its early days, the impact of the foundation has only increased. Since 1991, our generous donors and supporters have contributed more than $130 million to fund over 2,000 life-transforming programs throughout Canada. So you heard that we started 50,000. 30 years later, we've been able to contribute over $130 million. So thank you to our founders, donors, board members, employees, partners, corporate partners, colleagues, collaborators, you know who you are, and friends. And all of you have tirelessly enabled incredible impacts in every province and territory over 30 years. The images that you see give you a brief glimpse into the people and initiatives over the past 30 years since we started. We have had a storied history, storytelling. We have had many achievements and faced many challenges. Some moments lifted our hearts with inspiration. Some have brought us introspection and necessary change. They have all been important to our growth, and we're grateful that you believe in us and have kept us here. You have enabled women, girls, and gender diverse people to find fresh starts and get the support they need to move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership. You have enabled systemic change to move the needle on gender equality in Canada, and there is, in fact, no Canadian Women's Foundation without you. So let's fast forward to today. We have all faced immense challenges in 2020 and 2021. 30 years of gender equality gains are now at risk in the pandemic. Women's participation in the workforce at historic lows. risk of gender-based violence has increased. Increased, and we also know that women's participation has been hit hard. High COVID-19 risks for older women and racialized women and majority essential workers have been burdensome. They're tasked with the burden of caregiving demands. These are the conditions, just some of the conditions that folks have been living with. So remember I said I'm going to ask you and encourage you to share what gendered impacts of the pandemic concern you with your and your community most. So just remember that as we ask you some questions, you can participate. So women have been amongst the hardest hit in the pandemic, particularly women facing multiple barriers and inequities. The problems are not new. They have been only intensified in the shocks of the pandemic. 30 years ago, the Canadian Women's Foundation was founded to put Canada on a fast track to equity. Time has come to double down and build a new normal. As the Honorable Rosemary Brown, one of our founding mothers, said, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it. That is the vision of gender justice we can all get behind. And this is what we have done over 2020 and what we intend to do alongside all of you in 2021 and into the future. So the priorities. Priority one, we have been moving critical funds to communities. So this is important. In the economic challenges of the pandemic and reduced fundraising revenues in Canada's charitable sector, our donors have kept steady in supporting economic security, ending gender-based violence, promoting girls' empowerment, and supporting inclusive leadership. We are very thankful for that support. We have moved forward with our Northern strategy to build strong relationships with underserved communities in Canada's North. We have established partnerships. We're building an advisory committee and laying the groundwork that is critical for this work. We're happy to say we've started grant making through the strategy, and we're excited to move significant funds to great projects in the North. In March 2020, we launched the Tireless Together Fund, a nationwide emergency effort to mobilize philanthropy in the pandemic. Our supporters contributed over $500,000 in emergency funds toward this effort, which went out in grants to organizations pushing hard to respond to elevated community need and reduce capacity. We also partnered with the Government of Canada, as you heard before, to secure emergency funds for women-serving organizations in every region of the country. Since April 2020, we secured $33.6 million in rapid pandemic response funds to communities, for communities, and that is getting out to programs all throughout the country doing gender justice work. So moving forward to 2021, we will continue to distribute annual grants and multi-year grants. These grants will meet urgent community needs related to the pandemic, make strides with innovative new approaches to ongoing community challenges like poverty, violence, and marginalization, and will go toward proven local solutions that you heard about in the previous panel towards gender justice and responding to gender-based violence. Our second priority, we have been learning with grassroots partners and mapping unprecedented change. And it's really about rebuilding after the pandemic and set Canada up for gender equity. We need to pursue fundamental change. In 2020, we facilitated and co-authored Resetting Normal, which is a series of influential policy papers that outlined critical steps for decision makers to take for a gender equal Canada coming out of the pandemic. So moving forward to 2021, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to collect data on the experiences of diverse women, girls, and gender diverse people to inform our systems change work. For example, we're going to be doing community-based research on how to best respond to and prevent spikes in gender-based violence in emergency situations. We're also supporting a new research partnership that gender-based violence about the gender-based violence faced by Black women, girls, and trans and gender diverse people in Canada, and what actually needs to happen to best address it. We will continue to foster a network of grassroots partners across the country to learn from each other as they respond to urgent community needs related to gender injustice. And we will continue to support ongoing evaluation, critical evaluation of our multi-year grants, because we want to learn what impact our efforts are making and having to transform lives and communities, and what lessons we can take forward to sharpen our approach into the future. The final priority, it's about the fact that we have kept gender justice in the national spotlight. The impacts of the pandemic will be felt long after the virus recedes. And as Canada's Public Foundation for Gender Equality, we take the long view to understand trends, respond to evidence, and push for best practices to end gender injustice. So in 2021, we will urge federal, provincial, and territorial governments to put gender equality at the center of post-pandemic recovery efforts. We will amplify the promise of gender justice and serve as a strong voice in media so decision makers and the public hear the call for action. We will generate public awareness to bring together women, girls, and gender diverse folks who want to support the cause in their own communities and workspaces. And we will spread the word about the Signal for Help and other public campaigns and tools to build safety and rights at a time of intensified risk of gender-based violence. We will also sit at every significant policy table to ensure that our voices are heard on gender-related issues. And finally, we will continue to develop our own intersectional feminist approach, implementing an internal, systemic, anti-racism plan addressing racism against Black and Indigenous people and people of color, and developing our principles of feminist philanthropy and grant making. Why? Because gender justice starts at home. So in the Zoom chat, I encourage you to share which of these three priorities excite you most, and tell us why. Tell us why you're interested in them. So moving on, here's what the community investment here's what community investment meant in 2019 and 2020 year. About $14 million was contributed to communities through grants, and $4.2 million was contributed to communities through advocacy and policy change work, capacity building efforts for the gender equality sector, and evaluating the impact of grants to learn and improve approaches. So that was important. That's how the money was spent. Our official financial report, if you're interested, for fiscal year 2020 will be available in just a few weeks on our website. And moving forward in 2021 and beyond, you are needed more than ever. And here are the opportunities for change making that we're all asking all of you to do, all Canadians to do, to support. So these are the three ways that we're recommending. We want you to help us meet urgent community needs, quick responses, innovative approaches, tried and true solutions. Every year, the Canadian Women's Foundation distributes over 25 one-year grants to issues that need attention now. Whether it's pandemic-proofing a program or piloting a new gender equality initiative in a radically changing world, these flexible and fast grants make sure communities have help where they need it most. So that's the first one. The second is about empowering community impact. While gender inequality impacts everyone in Canada, every community is impacted differently depending on where they are and the unique barriers facing women and girls and gender diverse folks where they live. By supporting multi-year grants to grassroots community organizations, these communities are supported to deliver tailored local programs to end violence, empower girls, and build inclusive leadership, and support women's economic stability. This supports thousands of people and makes positive ripple benefits across communities. There's also the need to bolster the movement for gender justice. So this is the third. People need to be supported in moments of crisis, but we also must address the historical injustices and hidden legacies that lead to the crisis in the first place. This root cause work enables collective learning and action on the national agenda, and together we will spark the systems change Canada needs for an equitable and just pandemic recovery. So again, your opportunity to participate. Please share which of these three opportunities speak to you most, and also tell us why it does. So thank you for that. That's the work that we've been doing over the past year. And now we're going to move into a short Q&A. And this is my opportunity to introduce none other than the chair of our board at the Canadian Women's Foundation, Angela Johnson. And Sally, I'm going to invite you back. Sally Demachki, who you heard from before, who's a manager of Investment Readiness Program, and they will who will read out the questions for this very short Q&A we're about to do. Over to you, Sally.
Absolutely. So the first question I have here is, how do we address issues that require psychosocial support for immigrant women who are going through trying times during the pandemic? And how do we provide a healing process as many women are victims of gender-based violence in their previous nations of residence?
Well, that is not an easy question, but it's a very important question because we do know that immigrant women have particular challenges that those of us who've been in Canada a long time or who were born here do not. And so at the Canadian Women's Foundation, we take great care to ensure that the grants that we provide are going to organizations that need it most. And a lot of those organizations, as we talked about, are immigrant women's organizations. So we fund a number of them across the country to ensure that they're providing the supports that immigrant women need in their communities. Those supports will vary. Those supports will cover issues around economic stability. So it could be an employment training program. It could be developing the employability skills, understanding what the Canadian landscape is when it comes to job search. It could also be providing support groups that are needed. So it covers a range of issues. And so the job that we have to do at the Canadian Women's Foundation is ensure that our funding is reaching those organizations, communities that need it most. And a lot of those organizations and communities are immigrant women's organizations.
Absolutely. And to build on that, there is a question around, under the specific circumstances of the pandemic, how is it possible to help women who are facing domestic violence and gender-based violence?
Mm-hmm. Well, you've heard a lot about that today, whether through the work of some of our grantees and what they're doing, but also I talked earlier about the funding that we have been providing to our grantees, but also the systemic change work that is necessary, that we need to do. We know that the pandemic has really brought to the fore these issues in a way that we have been trying to for decades. For decades, we've been trying to tell the story, and in many ways, it felt like it was falling on deaf ears. But in today's environment, during this pandemic, of which gender-based violence is also and has also been a pandemic, it's impossible now for, I think, governments to ignore that this is critical. So organizations such as what you've heard from earlier are needing the funding. Our job is to raise the money from a number of different sources. It could be the corporate sector that has stepped up in a significant way in the past year. Individuals have also stepped up and seen the need to actually increase their giving, and the critical role that government plays needs to continue and be increased. So these are some of the ways, but also on an individual level, folks can give. Your giving matters, because were it not for individual donors and corporate support that we've received over the years, we would not have been here for 30 years doing this work. So I mean it when I say that it's because of you why we're here, it's because of you why we'll continue. And so we do need your individual support as well. And whatever you can do in your community, at your places of work, that's really what we need to happen going forward.
Well said, Paulette.
These are really hard questions as well. So thank you, Paulette, for sharing. I see there's a few more questions. I'm not sure how much time we have, but
you want to do one more?
Let's do that.
Okay.
So there was a question around how the affordable housing for women that was promised enables women to leave.
Mm-hmm. Before I mention the importance of being at every significant policy table, discussing issues that are impacting women's lives, right? So housing is one of those tables that we're at. Sometimes I think that we need to multiply ourselves 3 or 4 times to be at all of these tables, but you cannot in any way underestimate how critical housing is to stabilizing women's lives, to stabilizing the lives of folks who particularly have suffered from gender-based violence and have escaped with themselves and or their children. And so we know homelessness continues to be an issue in Canada. We also know that homelessness over the years has looked very different for women than men. And so being able to respond to that in a way that meets women where they're at is very important. Being able to protect women, because women who are homeless are actually more susceptible to various types of violence, sexual violence, gender-based violence. And so it's important that we're pushing our government representatives to be able to do that. So that's one of the tables that we're sitting at the Canadian Women's Foundation, to ensure that that it's not left out in terms of the discussions they're having, and an important part of the recovery during the pandemic as well.
Thank you, Paulette. And there's a few questions here about eligibility criteria and next steps, how people can help. So can you share with folks what they can do to learn more about that?
Well, I think Andrea earlier, and maybe she can send it again, sent out a link about the Safer, Stronger funds. So there she is with her thumbs up. So she's doing that. And I'm sure that one of my colleagues, Suzanne Duncan, may have a bit more to say than I've said before with respect to how you can help. Suzanne, did you want to just lend a word here?
Thank you, Paulette. Absolutely. I think you really spoke well to this. You know, one of the most important things that we can do right now, if we're able, is to donate to the Canadian Women's Foundation or to other organizations that are making sure women, girls, and gender diverse people have what they need to get through this. I know many folks here have volunteered for years. Many folks here have done lots of things in their communities. And with the challenges that we have around the pandemic, right now, the most important thing is if you're able to support, because those kinds of funds are going to allow organizations like the ones we've heard from already pivot to the kinds of protections that they need to do to keep women, girls, and gender diverse people safe right now.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you. All right. I'm just want to make sure that I can get some words in here from to make sure that I'm thanking a great group of women who continue to inspire and impress me every single day. So let me just let you know, these are the women that I work with. I've worked with them in person, and I'm working with them virtually. It's been quite seamless, although I miss you all in terms of just having that personal touch. These are special people who have worked hard over a very challenging year, giving their all to support the foundation's grantees, donors, partners, and colleagues. I call them the dream team. And I want to personally thank each and every one of you for all the work you do. I just want you to know that the foundation, you are in fact the foundation. This is who you are. And I'm so thankful for all that you do in your places of residence, in different parts of the country. And without you doing that work, we wouldn't be where we are today. So thank you. You are the energy and drive behind the Canadian Women's Foundation. I want to specifically acknowledge our own Beth Malcolm, who is our VP of Community Initiatives and who has had the audacity to tell us that she's retiring this year. So we're having to say goodbye, but I would prefer to say so long as opposed to goodbye. As she moves on to whatever the future will bring her. This is a woman who, has been just a rock for the foundation, who is tireless in the work that she does. She's been a tireless advocate for gender justice. She's loved by many, and adapting the word Ubuntu is actually a beautiful description of how Beth works and what you mean to us. We are Beth because you are. So you will hear from Beth later on, but now I want to thank and congratulate her now, because I may not get a chance later. She will be sorely missed by all of us, and you better not go too far, because however and whenever we can pull you back, we will. So now I'm going to, and it is my pleasure to pass the floor over to my esteemed board chair, Angela Johnson. Over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Paulette. Hello, everyone. I would like to take a minute or so to focus on our board of directors. They are tireless champions, ensuring we stay true to our mandate to build gender equality in Canada. Thank you, board of directors, for the ways you rise to the challenge. We are bidding a fond farewell to departing board members this year, starting with past chair Kristen Blakely-Kozman, Danielle Bisnar, Jennifer Flanagan, Shauna Hoyt, past co-chair Jody Johnson, Marilyn Roycroft, and past treasurer Paula Smith. These ladies have given their time, energies, and skills to propel the foundation forward. Thank you for being tireless. On behalf of the board, I would also like to welcome new board members who are joining us this year. And those members are Jazz Hottie, Peggy Moss, Sarah Robinson, Minu Sikand, Olivia Sobey, and Sandy Vanderzeel. Thank you for joining the board. We look forward to working with you in the future.